Life doesn't always go as planned. This is a mantra that I bet more than enough of you can relate to in some way, especially as you get older, as the more grandiose dreams you had as a child drift away. Though, with this sobering mindset can come an appreciation of the smaller things, from a nice meal with someone that you like to actively engaging in vices. Life becomes more about grasping those little moments in your hand and being a little bit selfish. And if there's one character who can represent this aspect of life in a multitude of ways, it would have to be the sad cigarette-smoking, saliva-swapping Cyclops senior servicewoman, Himeno, of Chainsaw Man. Now this video contains spoilers up to the final arc of Chainsaw Man Part 1, so if you want to avoid spoilers, you have been warned. Himeno was a minor character in the overall story of Chainsaw Man Part 1. During this time, she played both a personal foil to Aki's too cool persona, and a supporting leader for Denji, Power, and her rookies. Though, her experience as a devil hunter really shined through in how she presented herself, being one of the few who remained calm and collected during a majority of the Infinity Devil arc, along with flaunting her Ghost Devil contract just to prove a point. Though, unfortunately for Himeno, in reality she might have just been too sane for her own good, as only the truly crazy devil hunters make it far in this business. But before we get too into that, let's discuss the meaning behind both her name and design. Starting first with her design. Himeno seems to be designed to look similar to Aki, specifically Aki with his hair down, which seems to be done for two specific reasons. Firstly, it seems to be done as a way to reflect the type of person that Aki would become later on in the story of Chainsaw Man, even having the eye he implants with the future devil being the same one Himeno sacrificed. While the other reason I'll cover later on in the video. Though, speaking of Aki's connection, it also seems like Fujimoto implanted a bit of his earlier works into Himeno as well, such as Mitsuku Ihara from Imoto no An, a one-shot Fujimoto released 7 months before the release of Chainsaw Man itself. Now, the two not only share a visual similarity, but more importantly, Mitsuku acts as a leader figure for her sister's life. Everything she did, they would copy. This is reflected in Aki and Himeno's own partnership, as she ended up influencing him in a multitude of ways, from the more obvious, such as getting him to smoke because she does, to the less noticeable, such as Aki's personality shift midway through the part. Now, name-wise, Himeno is actually rather simple. Her name is comprised of two different characters, the first being Hime, which translates to princess, and then you have the no portion of her name, which translates to wild, field, or countryside. So altogether, Himeno's name can roughly translate to countryside princess, which matches up very well with her role in one of Chainsaw Man's overarching themes, this being Aesop's fable of the country mouse versus the city mouse, which is a simple metaphor for one's lifestyles and views on risk versus reward, with the city mouse being someone who takes big risks in the face of greater rewards, where the country mouse is someone who chooses to live a less risky and more comfortable life in exchange for a life without much rewards at all. Himeno herself was a country mouse, though it took her a while to realize it, and the princess portion of her name is likely in reference to this, with her waiting for the right man to sweep her off her feet and take her away, a Prince Charming of sorts. Along with this, her name can also be understood as Field Princess, which is seemingly referenced in the cover of Chapter 25, Ghosts, Snakes, and Chainsaws, but more importantly, the design of her contracted devil companion, the Ghost Devil. The Ghost Devil is the embodiment of phasmophobia, or the fear of ghosts, and due to being a common fear found all throughout the world, it is a rather powerful devil. Now, for you to fulfill a contract and get the Ghost Devil to work for you, it requires a sacrifice from the contractor. In the case of Himeno, she was able to gain control of a single hand of the Ghost Devil in exchange for her right eye, which is a running trend in Fujimoto's work actually, though in cases of emergency, the Ghost Devil can be offered more of its contractor's body to give them more control of its body. Now, design-wise, the Ghost Devil is awesome. It is comprised of 3 major segments, so we'll start firstly with the most standout of them, this being the massive human-like head resting atop the whole of the body. Hanging from it is long, unkept black hair in the style of the traditional Onryo, or vengeful spirit, found all throughout Japanese horror media, with one of the most famous examples of this being Sadako of Ringu fame. Though one standout standout detail of this face are how the eyes and mouth are sewed shut. This is more than just an aesthetic design for the devil. It's done to physically show that it cannot see through normal means. Instead, the ghost devil hunts through commands or follows emotions, honing specifically in on fear, which means that if you can clear your mind, then fighting the ghost devil can become as peaceful as walking through a field of flowers. Which, speaking of, we move on to its body, which is comprised of a banquet of flowers, which all share a similar look to the ones that Himeno has in her cover page. The flowers themselves appear to be daisies, which are known as a symbol of purity and innocence, but have always had a sort of symbolic connection to death as well, such as in Celtic legend, where it's claimed that they were brought to the earth by the gods to cheer up grieving parents who had just lost their children. And that legend, mixed with the fact that these flowers are very prevalent in graveyards, birthed the phrase pushing up daisies, which dates back to a poem from 1918. The flower has in a way become the Western equivalent to the Japanese red spider lily. Though to push up all those daisies, the ghost devil would need a lot of hands, and they're all located right below its banquet body, which leads us to the final segment, the large mass of human-like arms that act as tentacle-like appendages for the ghost devil, allowing it to both stand itself up and attack its targets. Along with this, the palms of each hand possess a mouth, which allows the ghost devil to communicate with its contracted hunters. Now, these hands are the ghost devil's most powerful asset, with an intense grip strength, being able to squeeze and shred flesh with ease. Even one hand is strong enough to disable power without much issue, while a mass of hands can overwhelm and pierce the body of even the katana man. But more importantly, the body of the devil is a poltergeist, meaning that not only can it become invisible at will, it can also move or damage the physical plane while being unable to be hit in retaliation by normal means. Though devil weapons like the katana man's blades or the angel devil's life force weapons can still harm it. Now, the arms themselves seem to be a reference to one of the more popular ghost yokais called Minakuta no Yore, or uninvited ghost hand. They are essentially spirits from the afterlife who have unfinished business but aren't strong enough to manifest as anything other than a ghostly hand. And they are usually harmless and only wish for someone to acknowledge them or read their will, though in some cases they can get violent, but they're really only a threat in large quantities, which explains the sheer massive arms that the ghost devil has at its disposal. A famous example of this type of spirit being Hanako, the toilet spirit of Japanese urban legend, though in some cases Hanako can fully manifest. Or another example of this being the ghost alleyway from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, this being a mass of hands which can drag their victims to hell. Now, Himeno's pairing with the ghost devil might have been done intentionally to symbolically connect to her character's own familiarity with death and how it has shaped her as a person, as prior to the main story of Chainsaw Man, Himeno had already lost 5 different buddies, each of them leaving her in a deeper state of survivor's guilt. After a while, she seemed to have gained a sixth sense for those who are and aren't cut out to be devil hunters. And while on the surface, Himeno might seem like a really flirty and happy person, this is only a mask she has created in order to make her appear less sane than she really was. Because in reality, she had developed a somewhat nihilistic or pessimistic worldview, not caring about her own future because she believed it wouldn't last long anyways, and even if she died, no one would care, as she had become heavily desensitized to death to the point that she could no longer cry at the loss of her rookies, and she could take abuse from those grieving those rookies without a hint of remorse of her own. Because of this, she began to throw herself into vices like alcohol, sex, and smoking, all to dispel this numbness that she felt while keeping her mind clouded. She even became somewhat notorious for how often she would sleep around, though soon someone would enter her life that would give her hope again. This being Aki Hayakawa, a young man who joined the committee with plans of killing the gun devil, which is a pretty common motivation, so much so that Himeno herself actually joined with a similar motivation in mind, but lost spirit of that goal. But something about Aki felt different. He is someone who seemingly existed without an ego. He had no real desires of his own outside of achieving this goal, but he was also someone who made himself useful even if he wasn't asked to. And it was this aspect of his personality that left a big impression on Himeno. She had found someone who was looking after her now as much as she was them. Someone who might actually care if she died.
Ghost, I'll give you all of me. So let me use all of you. Aki can cry. Devil hunters get so used to the deaths of those close to them that they stop crying. But Aki is quick to cry. Even when newbies he'd been babysitting died, he'd cry in secret. That made him interesting. Having someone care enough to cry for you must make a person happy. Don't you die, Aki. 'Cause when I die, I want you to cry.
Now, her relationship with Aki is actually questionably romantic, as Himeno clearly had feelings for him, but these never seem to have been picked up until after her death, when her sister brought Aki the letters that she would write home about him, though she was able to motivate Aki to try to live life a little bit more for himself and seek out easy revenge when he could. And funny enough, we actually get to see him sort of follow her advice right away, not only with the defeat of the Ghost Devil, but when him and Denji send Himeno off in the best way they know how, by kicking the dude partially responsible for her death in the balls multiple times until he screams outward into the heavens, which is seemingly a reference to Crollo's symphony from Hunter x Hunter. Though Himeno and Aki's relationship is also in reference to something else, one of Chainsaw Man's biggest influences, this being FLCL and the relationship between Momimi and Naota. Momimi Sanajima is a lonely, depressed, chain-smoking high school truant who from time to time forces herself emotionally and physically onto her crush's younger brother in an attempt to make up for the empty feeling that he left her with. And a lot of those elements get transferred onto Himeno being somewhat of a recreation of Momimi, from smoking being a major part of their characters, to her faking a persona of a cheerful elder who deep down is so emotionally damaged that they don't know what to do with themselves anymore, to even more subtle elements like how Himeno is trying to get Aki to be more like the guy that she wants, by getting him into smoking or forcing him to get piercings. This is similar to how Momimi is trying to shape Naota to be more like his brother, pushing him to start things like baseball or giving half of her sour drink, with sour drinks being a sign of maturity, as sour is a more adult flavor than Naota's more preferred sweet drinks. Though an aspect of Aki and Himeno's relationship that isn't like Momimi and Naota is Himeno actually loved Aki in some way, where Momimi was just using Naota as an outlet. And while Naota was well aware of what was happening to him, Aki was completely oblivious to Himeno's true feelings, likely writing off her flirtatious personality as just messing with him, which is in part thanks to her own reputation that she created in order to escape her own depression. No matter how blunt Himeno got, nothing about her seemed genuine to Aki. He had become more of a brother than a boyfriend, which actually makes a lot of sense, because as we learned from Jump Festa 2022's interview, Himeno and Aki were originally intended to be brother and sister. Along with this, Himeno was also supposedly going to be Denji's own buddy instead of power. She was actually intended to live a lot longer than she did as well, though, much like life, not everything turns out as you planned. And this is actually a really good summary of Fujimoto's own approach when it comes to writing and how he handles characters. He tries not to become personally attached to characters and give them strict ends. Instead, when writing an arc, if the time calls for an injury or death, he will follow through with it because it makes the scene more impactful. And this style of character writing allows for death to carry serious weight to it, as these were people with unfinished business and goals that we knew about and wanted to see play it out. But now they're dead, and they're not coming back. And Himeno reflects this aspect of Chainsaw Man's writing the best, both meta-wise and directly, as she joined the Devil Hunter committee because she wanted to kill the Gun Devil, but that didn't work out, so she pivoted to being one of the best hunters that she could be, but 5 out of the 6 partners she had died horribly, leaving her growing cold, so instead she pivoted to a life of vices, which didn't last long because along came Aki, someone who she tried to retire with, but thanks to her previous decisions, she couldn't convince the person that she loved to follow her. So in the end, she finally decided to use what was remaining of her life to protect the one person she cared about. Because at the end of the day, life doesn't always go as planned, but we only carry the weight of the baggage we packed ourselves. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/medinotthebadguy. And if you never know best, well, I know what is best. That's a copy of Shimonetta, A Boring World Where the Concept of Dirty Jokes Doesn't Exist at buyshimonetta.com.